Hello there, Drew Hanish from Whiskey Lore, and time for another Matchup Monday. As promised a month ago, I am doing a matchup of the winner between Airstone and Scarabus versus White Horse, which is a value whiskey that I found to be pretty good for the price. This jug, 1.75 liter jug, cost $25. That Scarabus cost $35 for the smaller 750 ml bottle. So there is a price disparity between these. Does it show up in the tasting? And interestingly enough, I was going to bring this up a little bit before I jump in and do this tasting. I've been working on my Tennessee whiskey history book, and this past week I have been digging into some really interesting stories. And one of the ones that I will be covering in the book is about the bottling of whiskey. And when did it start? And it's really interesting because, like a lot of the stuff I'm finding about whiskey history, all the stuff that we've been taught through the years really isn't necessarily what the real situation was. In fact, what I was finding was that it wasn't until the 1800s that the bottling of whiskey really began, and it didn't start in larger bottles. It actually started in whiskey flasks. So they call them liquor flasks, glass liquor flasks. So in the early 1800s, if you wanted to carry around your whiskey with you, then you would do that in one of these small little glass flasks that would go along with your powder horn and your powder flask. And nary the two should meet. Otherwise, well, you could do proofing tests, I guess, if you wanted to do so. Just don't have a match anywhere nearby. And so it was really interesting to see that, because this isn't the era when you can carry a whiskey flask around with you, really. I remember watching old shows where, you would see somebody pulling out their whiskey flask. I can tell you that in my lifetime, I have never encountered someone pulling a whiskey flask out. Have you? Because I haven't. I own two. I have two whiskey flasks. I can tell you that I have not taken them with me anywhere. And I guess the main reason is, well, first of all, the first one I got as a wedding present, and it's all metal and it leaks. So it really wouldn't be a good thing to carry around in your pocket. The second one is one that I bought as a trinket when I went to Lynchburg, and they had this nice leather covered old number 7 black flask that I thought was really, really nice. So I said, I'm going to go ahead and buy that so that I've got it. But unless you have a chauffeur that can carry you around, if you're going to put a bottle of whiskey in your coat, and how many people wear long coats anymore, except for maybe, occasionally you might see on a winter day. I always was one that loved those long tail length raincoats and such. Something like that, you might be able to carry one in, but nobody really wears anything like that anymore. It's like I saw a picture of a 1950s Detroit Tigers baseball game, and every single fan that was going to this game had on a fedora and a coat with a tie, and I'm going, and you're going to a baseball game, and I'm assuming it's summertime, maybe it was opening day, I don't know. There were no kids around. It was all just adult males going to the ball game. So eras change. Maybe that's why we like Sinatra so much, because we can go back and we can kind of see the way it was at that point, and kind of get into the whole feel of that dressing up. Because we live in a dress down society these days. I can't tell you how many times I get comments on my tie, and they're like, "You're keeping the tie companies in business, aren't you?" Yes, I am, because I'm not a big fan of a shirt with a collar without a tie. The jacket, with the shirt, without the tie. I'm not a fan of that either. I will do it, but it's just not me anyway. But the whiskey flask, I think, is it's a lost piece of equipment, and unfortunately, because of open container laws, it probably helped make this kind of fade away. But who knows? Maybe sometime when I'm going to be in an Uber and I don't have to worry about driving anywhere, just for the heck of it, I'll carry my little flask around with me and I'll wow everybody, because they'll be like, we're sitting at the dinner table and at the restaurant, and I pull a flask out just to see what people do. It would be really interesting. Or maybe I could ride a horse. No, I think they actually can get you for for drunk driving a horse as well. All right, so this is White Horse. White Horse is the less expensive whiskey. What's interesting is they are very similar colors, although the Scarabus is a little bit lighter. I'm going to suggest that this definitely has color in it. That, I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I think it does, because it is a little darker than what I would expect out of a younger Islay whiskey. If you see 5-year to 10-year Ardbeg, it is really, really light in color. So I would assume that some color has been added to that for consistency. And I haven't looked at the label. I should do that before I give them a reputation they don't deserve. No, I don't see anything on here about no color. All right, so there we go. All right, so when I brought these glasses over, I actually forgot which one was which, but you could look by the color and you could tell the difference between the two if you knew of that difference, but you can also tell greatly by smell. Some may say this isn't really a fair matchup because they're so different from each other in terms of White Horse has a light smoke to it. I get a very grassy note on this. It comes along with the little bit of apple and pear. There's a hint of smoke in there, but it's not heavy. I would say that if you are not a fan of smoky whiskeys, you probably are going to be turned off by the little bit of smoke that is here, but it has a fairly competent nose. That grassy note gets a little solvent twinge to it. Cheers. I like the toffee on the palate of this, with a little bit of a grain note and then that smoke. A little char comes in on the end too. For a value whiskey, to me, this really stands up in terms of being one that, if you want something that is a light drinker, inexpensive, and something for your second sip of the night, I think this whiskey would do really well. If you've been drinking some lightly peated whiskeys, maybe this is the way that you progress through the evening. Now, for this whiskey, and this is 40 ABV, so, and that is my only real annoyance with this product. I think this might actually be really much better at, say, 46%, which is where this one sits. But we're talking about a big price difference here too between the two. I hate buying a jug of whiskey like that, because I feel like I'm never going to drink that. Sometimes I have a hard time getting through a bottle. I mean, I have a lot of bottles around, so getting them finished is tough. And you have to fight that urge that says, man, I have so many bottles that are close to done. Maybe I should just, finish that bottle tonight and finish that bottle tomorrow night, and then you get into trouble. So this actually has a very medicinal nose. The smoke is there. If you're not a peat fan, especially an Islay peat fan, you're not going to probably dig this whiskey. But if you are, you will find some things here that you can really enjoy, actually. It's got a nice barbecue bacon note to it. So there's a little brininess to it, and that is found in the bacon. And it actually has a little age scent to it. Maybe the color is true to this. I get kind of a little leather note in this as well. Cheers. After you've had the toffee note in the other one, you expect this one to kind of hit you with a flavor right off the bat too, and it doesn't. There's a nice little bit of matchstick smoke in this, but it's very light. It is a clean palate on this, but it is not very descript. There's more flavor coming out of this on the palate than there is on this. This is a much lighter whiskey in terms of impacts of flavor on the palate. In fact, let me have another sip. When I'm not feeling a lot of impact, then I want to go around and hit other parts of my mouth and really take it all in. Maybe there is some orchard fruit in there coming through. The smoke does surround you, but it actually becomes pretty overly dominant. A little char note there on the end. Maybe a little bit of a carob note in there too, but I mean, it is, to me, very much that barbecue bacon that I got on the nose. I would love more of that here, but it just goes to more of a slightly medicinal smoke on the palate and not a lot of other stuff going on around it. Which one of these two would I choose if I'm going to go back? Because this is down to its last couple drops. And by the way, this is the color that a lot of bottles were for a long time because they didn't have the technique to be able to color bottles. But this was great for wine because wine would not degrade as quickly with sunlight hitting it. And that's what I found really interesting. It was 1600s before wine was starting to show up in bottles, and even then it was a rarity. But they said wine was pretty rough back then because they would keep it in barrels and it would oxidize, and it just, oxidization's good for whiskey, but after a while you just end up with vinegar in your barrel, so when it's wine, so that's not so good. But anyway, really interesting kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I think I can go without buying the Scarabus again. Maybe I'll buy it. Who knows? It is $35 is a great value for the nose. For the palate, it's good. There's nothing disappointing about it there's nothing offensive about it. It's just, I kind of would like, and I love the proof point, 60 or 46% ABV, but it just feels like it could have a little bit more dimension on the palate, I think, is the difference. The thing is, if I was going to be doing if I was going to share some whiskey with someone, I would probably share the Scarabus and the White Horse. It could sit in the decanter, but I don't know if that would be a whiskey I would show off. It's a whiskey that, as I say, is good for your second glass of whiskey if you're going to do that. Hope you enjoyed this. Any thoughts, please share them with me, and you can do so in the comments below. Give me a like if you enjoyed the video or learned something new. And until next time, cheers and Slainte. I should. What would it do? Must know. Ooh, juiced it up a little bit. Yeah, it adds some life to that White Horse, upping the smoke a little bit. Toffee is still there. It's interesting. If I had a lot of that Scarabus left, I might actually utilize the White Horse to do a little mixing. Interesting.